Hey guys, how's it going? Should be a quick video today. I know I've said that before and it's ended up going 15 minutes, but I'll try not to let that happen. So today we're going over Shurley chapter 13, lesson 1, and I'm going to look at a sonnet from Shakespeare because I know some of you are doing Shakespeare for your poetry project, and I want to look at some really formally strict poetry that follows rhyme, scheme, and meter pretty strictly since we've been looking at some stuff that was a little bit more freeform the last couple of days. Also, your Shurley Chapter 12 Lesson 2 exercise is posted on Google Classroom, so make sure you get that done today. It's multiple choice, should be pretty simple. I've just asked you to identify the indefinite pronouns. If you want to look in your book or at yesterday's video at those lists of indefinite pronouns, that would make it really, really easy. I don't expect anyone to do poorly on that exercise. Again, I'm not going to ask you to do anything difficult with indefinite pronouns right at this point in the year. All I want you to be able to do is find them in a sentence, which is all today's exercise asks you to do. With that said, so Shurley chapter 13, lesson 1 introduces pattern 5 sentences. These are a lot like pattern 4, subject, noun, linking verb, predicate, noun, pattern 4. These are subject, noun, linking verb, predicate, adjective, pattern 5. They're going to have a very similar structure. They operate almost the same way. You've got a noun followed by a linking verb, but then the thing following it is an adjective, okay? It still refers back to the noun, but it describes it rather than renaming it. So instead of, let's just look at the first sentence, I am tall. Instead of I am a teacher would be pattern 4 because teacher would be a predicate nominative because it's a noun, it's a person, right? It would refer back to I. These are not going to be a person, place, thing, or idea, these words that refer back. These are going to be descriptors, adjectives, things that tell us something about the subject. Okay, so I am tall. Tall is then an adjective. It describes someone. It's our predicate adjective. It's linked by the linking verb am back to I, our subject pronoun. So that's pretty straightforward. Like I said, it's set up a lot like a pattern 4 sentence. It's just an adjective instead of a noun. They are very nice. So they is obviously our subject pronoun. Are is our linking verb. And then are what? They are nice. And then nice is a predicate adjective describing they. Very would be an adverb describing nice. But that's not super important. You just have to be able to identify the predicate adjectives for my purposes. Third sentence, your mom seems angry. So seems is a linking verb. Things like seems, be, feels, words like that can be linking verbs, but there are some words that can be linking or action verbs depending on the context. I'm not going to give you those and ask you to identify them. Just know that if I give you a sentence and ask you to find a predicate adjective in it, the verb is a linking verb. So your mom seems angry. So mom is our subject noun. Seems is our linking verb. And how does mom seem? Angry. Angry is our predicate adjective. Your new shoes are cool. Subject is shoes. What shoes are, linking verb. What are the shoes? They're cool. So cool would be our predicate adjective describing shoes. The football team is extremely talented. Team is our subject noun. So team is would be our linking verb. Team is what? Is talented. Talented would be our predicate adjective. Like I said, this is going to sound pretty much just like the subject noun, linking verb, predicate noun sentences that we worked on. And it is basically the same thing, the same concept, the same structure of a sentence. It's just that the word that is being linked back to the noun is an adjective describing the noun rather than another noun renaming it, okay? So I don't think there's anything super complicated here. Let me check. I believe we have an exercise on this. Let me type that. I believe we have an exercise on this tomorrow. Let me check in my lesson plans. So... Actually, no, we're not doing an exercise for 13.1 this week. We'll probably do that on Monday of next week. So that'll give you a little time to let this sink in and let you think about it. But with that said, I'm going to move on to the poem to try to keep today's video short as I promised. So this is Sonnet 18, probably one of Shakespeare's most famous, if not his most famous sonnet. So Shakespeare, most of you probably know, probably the most famous writer ever to live in any language, definitely the most famous English writer. Known mostly for his plays like Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, Hamlet. A lot of those you'll have to read in high school or college. A lot of them are very, very good. I enjoy Shakespeare a lot. He wrote a series of well over 100 sonnets. Some of them and some of his plays are a little bit more adult, so if you do have Shakespeare, be kind of careful about what you pick. But this one is pretty friendly. It's more of just a basic love poem, even though there's a lot of depth to it. So this is Sonnet 18, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? I will say this website's formatting is not exactly how it's supposed to be. I'll tell you where the line breaks should be, but basically it is a sonnet because it's 14 lines. but each 4 lines, there should be a little bit of white space to break up the stanza, because that's the way that they're originally formatted. That's the way they're formatted in most books of Shakespeare I've had. And then the last 2 lines are just together as a couplet, but I'll point that out as we get to it. So I'll just read it first, and then we'll talk about, rhyme scheme, meter, meaning, and all that. Because as I said, this poem is very strict on its form, unlike the poems we've worked with the last couple of days. But keep in mind, the poems we worked with the last couple of days were written within the last 100 years or so. I think within the last 50 years, whereas this poem was written probably around the late 1500s, 1596, 1597, I think is when he was writing his sonnets. So a long, long time ago. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. All right, so that probably sounds like a lot of nonsense in places to you guys. This is written in really formal English, and it's written in what we would call early modern English. This isn't Old English or Middle English or anything like that. This is modern English. Most of the words are the same as ours. Most of them are spelled the same outside of the places he uses apostrophes instead of writing out the whole word. And that's more of a stylistic choice than anything. But the language is understandable. It's just that he uses certain words differently than we do, and Shakespeare wrote in a way that was pretty complex. So first thing I want to look at is pretty simple, just the rhyme scheme. So we have day, so that would be our A. Temperate doesn't rhyme with that, so that's B. May, A, because it rhymes with day. Date, temperate, date, close enough. That's a partial rhyme, so B. Shines, C, because that doesn't rhyme with any of this. Dimmed, D. Declines, C, because it rhymes with shined. Untrimmed, D, because it rhymes with dimmed. Fade, E, because it doesn't rhyme with anything else. Oest, F. Shade, E, because it rhymes with fade. Growest, F. C and thee, both G. All of Shakespeare's sonnets follow this rhyme scheme. It's always A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. That's Shakespeare's rhyme scheme for each and every one of his sonnets. All 14 lines, all 3 sets of quatrains, 3 4-line stanzas that go A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F. And then that last couplet, that last 2-line stanza always rhymes with itself, G, G. So that should make any of you doing Shakespeare have a pretty easy time distinguishing his rhyme scheme, because it's always like that. And his meter is always the same. He wrote in what's called iambic pentameter. Iambic, you don't have to worry about. It's the way that the syllables are stressed. That's something that's way more complicated than I would get into with probably even a high school poetry class. Maybe if it was like a senior level or an advanced thing. But anything in middle school, you're not going to have to worry about that. But the actual number of syllables, what pentameter means, penta is 5. You should know from like pentagon. But you multiply that by 2. So 5 times 2, 10. There are 10 syllables in each line. Okay, so we can walk through a couple of them to show you. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Okay, so there are always 10 syllables all the way down. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. All the way, 10 syllables each line. Again, that makes it pretty easy. So with poetry like this, some of you may be inclined to pick a poet like this just because, it's going to be really easy to find the rhyme scheme and meter because it's very, very strict. He doesn't deviate much. He doesn't change how he's doing that. But the actual meaning may be a little bit harder to figure out, which is okay because, you get it easier in some ways, harder in others. So this is, meaning-wise, it's a pretty straightforward love poem. He's asking if he should compare the person he loves to a summer's day, a warm, pretty day. He says they're prettier and more temperate, which means, they're not too hot, not cold, nothing like that. Like they're the perfect temperature. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. So he's saying there's bad things about summer. Like it doesn't last long enough. It's too windy in certain months. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dim. So he's saying sometimes the sun doesn't shine enough, sometimes it's too hot, and every fair from fair sometimes declines. So that's a little bit of a complicated line. He's basically saying everything that's beautiful usually fades away. by chance or nature's changing course. So he's saying it fades, by something random happening to it or just because time passing. He says, but thy eternal summer shall not fade. So he's saying this person is better than the summer because he's saying they'll stay young and beautiful forever, which is ridiculous, right? Nobody stays young and beautiful forever, but we'll get to what he means in just a second. Shakespeare usually waits until his couplet, his last two lines, to really give the meaning of his poem. Nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. So that's another one that's worded a little funny. He's saying that fair means that beauty, and ost here it means ownest, like something that you own. So he's saying your beauty you won't ever lose possession of it. So he's just basically repeating himself that this person is going to stay young and beautiful forever. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. So he's saying you'll never die. Again, this is getting kind of ridiculous. Shakespeare isn't a stupid guy, so why is he making these absurd claims and brags that this person he loves is never going to age, they're never going to die, and all that? When in eternal lines to time thou growest, basically he's saying you're going to live forever. And then in the couplet we understand what he means. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. What he's saying is as long as this poem exists, as long as people still read this poem, his love will have life because people will be reading about this person he loved and basically breathing life into his poetry, and through that giving life back to the person he loved. Because there's the old saying I've heard before that you die twice, once when you actually die and once the last time somebody ever thinks of you or says your name. What Shakespeare is doing here, he's kind of subscribing to that idea. He's saying basically you may die mortally, but as long as people read my poetry and read about my love for you, you'll live forever, which is kind of a nice thought. It's kind of arrogant on Shakespeare's part because he's saying I'm so great that my poetry is going to live forever. He's not exactly wrong. I think as long as people read the English language, and maybe even after, Shakespeare will probably continue to be read because he's pretty great. But yeah, so hopefully that breaks down the meaning of this one a little bit for you. Most of his stuff, like I said, it waits until that last couplet to really give you the punch, the meaning. That's the way his sonnets are generally structured. If you have any questions about sonnets, more formally strict poetry, maybe if you're still struggling with rhyme scheme and meter, let me know and I can talk about that some more, or I can give you some one-on-one advice. If you struggled with today's exercise on identifying indefinite pronouns, let me know so I can review over those. I will review all of that next week anyway, because we'll probably have a chapter 12 and 13 quiz that I'll have a day for a review before. And like I said, predicate adjectives, those pattern 5 sentences, make sure you're ready for an exercise on that next Monday, and we should be good. All right, see you guys.